40 years of work, 40 years of showing up, of managing responsibilities, raising families, building careers, contributing to society. And at the end of those 40 years, the majority of people arrive at retirement financially underprepared, not marginally short of where they plan to be, not close but not quite, genuinely, significantly, frighteningly short, in a way that affects the quality of every year that follows. In a way that turns what should be the most financially relaxed chapter of a life into one characterized by anxiety, constraint, and in many cases, genuine hardship. How does this happen? This is the question I want to answer directly in this video, because the answer reveals something that most retirement content never says clearly enough. Most people do not retire broke because of bad luck. They do not retire broke because their income was too low. They do not retire broke because the economy was against them, or because retirement security is inherently impossible for ordinary people. They retire broke because of 7 specific decisions made at specific points across their working lives that compound over decades into retirement outcomes that feel inevitable at the end but were entirely avoidable throughout. 7 decisions. Each one individually reasonable seeming. Each one compounded over a working lifetime, producing a retirement position that is dramatically worse than the same person would have had if they had understood the full consequence of each decision at the moment they made it. I want to be direct about who this video is for. If you are in your 30s or 40s and have been telling yourself that retirement planning is something you will deal with more seriously later, this video is urgently for you. The window for meaningful correction is still wide open, but it narrows every year. If you are in your 50s and are looking at your current position with concern, this video is for you too. The window is narrower, but it is not closed. And if you are approaching 60 and wondering whether it is too late, the answer is that it is not too late to make the remaining years of contribution count significantly. But understanding these 7 decisions clearly is the starting point. 7 decisions. The consequences of each one measured across a working life, and the specific concrete corrections that change the trajectory, starting from wherever you currently are. Let us go through every single one. The retirement crisis nobody admits. Before we go through the 7 decisions, let me establish the scale of what we are discussing, because the retirement savings crisis is significantly larger than most people realize, and understanding the scale creates the urgency that honest retirement planning requires. In virtually every developed economy, the data on retirement preparedness tells the same story. The majority of working-age adults are not on track for a financially secure retirement. Not slightly behind, not close. The gap between what most people are accumulating and what a genuinely secure retirement requires is substantial, and in many cases, without meaningful course correction, it will not close. The reasons for this crisis are multiple and interconnected. The shift from defined benefit pension schemes, which provided a guaranteed income at retirement regardless of investment performance, to defined contributions schemes, which provide an outcome entirely dependent on how much was contributed and how well it was invested, has transferred the responsibility for retirement funding from employers to individuals. And individuals, in the absence of the financial education needed to manage that responsibility effectively, are not managing it well. Simultaneously, life expectancy has increased dramatically. A retirement that previous generations planned for 15 years now routinely lasts 25 or 30. The capital base required to sustain a comfortable retirement for a longer period is significantly larger than most people are working toward. And the combination of insufficient accumulation and longer depletion periods produces the retirement funding shortfall that defines the financial lives of millions of people in their later years. None of this is destiny. All 7 decisions that produce this outcome are correctable, right up until the moment they are not, which is the point at which it is too late to change them. Understanding them now, while there is still time to correct the trajectory, is the most practically valuable thing this video can do. Starting too late decision 1. The most mathematically costly, the first and most mathematically devastating decision, is also the simplest to name and the hardest to correct. Starting to save and invest for retirement later than the mathematics require. We have covered compound growth in detail in an earlier video in this series. But in the specific context of retirement planning, the cost of a late start is particularly stark because retirement has a fixed deadline, and the compound growth that was not captured during the years of delay cannot be manufactured by increased contributions in later years. It is permanently gone. Here is the mathematics stated directly. Someone who begins contributing to a retirement account at 25 and contributes consistently until 65 has 40 years of compound growth available. Someone who starts at 35 has 30. Someone who starts at 45 has 20. The difference between a 40-year and a 20-year compound growth period at any reasonable rate of return is not a factor of 2, because of the exponential nature of compounding. The 40-year period produces dramatically more than twice the wealth of the 20-year period from identical monthly contributions. The practical consequence of this is that the decision made in your 20s about whether to start taking retirement savings seriously or to defer it until things are more financially settled is the single most consequential financial decision of your entire life in terms of retirement outcome. More consequential than investment selection, more consequential than the specific platform or fund chosen, more consequential than the fee level. The timing of the start, given sufficient time to compound, determines more of the final retirement outcome than any other single variable. Consider the retirement outcome of 2 people who both retire at 65 on identical final salaries with identical contribution rates throughout their careers. Person A started contributing at 25, person B started contributing at 35, just 10 years later. At identical contribution rates and identical investment returns, person A's retirement portfolio at 65 is dramatically larger than person B's, not by 10 years worth of contributions, but by the compound growth that those 10 additional years of early contributions produced across the full 40-year period. The 10-year difference in start date has produced a retirement funding gap that no amount of catch-up contribution in person B's 40s and 50s can fully close, because the compound base that those early contributions would have created over 4 decades simply cannot be replicated by later, larger contributions over a shorter period. Research on retirement wealth accumulation consistently identifies the age at which consistent retirement saving begins as one of the strongest predictors of retirement adequacy, stronger than contribution amount in many cases, and stronger than investment selection in almost all cases. The compound effect of an early start provides a mathematical advantage that is essentially irreversible. A person who begins contributing meaningfully at 25 and maintains consistent contributions is on a fundamentally different retirement trajectory than an otherwise identical person who starts at 35, even if the late starter subsequently contributes more aggressively. The correction for this decision depends on which side of the optimal start point you are on. If you have not yet started, start today. Any amount, any imperfect starting point. Every month of delay is compound growth permanently foregone. If you have already started but started late, the correction is a combination of maximizing contributions from this point forward, utilizing every tax-advantaged retirement vehicle available to the maximum extent, and potentially extending your working period to allow more compound time. None of these corrections fully recover the lost years of early compounding, but they meaningfully improve the outcome from whatever the current position is. Action this week. If you have not yet started contributing to a retirement account, open one today. If you have started but are contributing less than the maximum your budget genuinely allows, calculate what maximizing your contribution would cost you monthly and what it would produce at retirement. If your employer offers a retirement match, confirm you are capturing the full match. Leaving employer matching on the table is the equivalent of turning down a guaranteed 100% return on that portion of your income. Saving without investing, decision 2. The discipline that goes nowhere. The second decision that produces retirement poverty is one of the most painful because it involves people doing something genuinely responsible and still arriving at an inadequate outcome. They saved, they just did not invest. We have covered the mathematics of saving versus investing in detail in an earlier script, but the retirement-specific dimension of this decision deserves its own treatment because the timeline of retirement saving makes the difference between saving and investing particularly dramatic. A person who saves consistently for 30 or 40 years into instruments that return below inflation, traditional savings accounts, cash deposits, low-yield fixed income products, does not just earn a lower return than they could have. They may end up, in real purchasing power terms, with less than they saved in nominal terms. 30 years of disciplined saving at 1% interest in a 3% inflation environment produces a real return of negative 2% per year, meaning the purchasing power of the accumulated savings declines each year despite the nominal balance growing. At retirement, this person has a balance that looks substantial in nominal terms and is genuinely inadequate in real terms because the inflation that operated against their savings every year for 3 decades has significantly eroded what the money can actually buy. This is the retirement savings trap that catches the most financially responsible and the most financially naive simultaneously because it requires no bad decision, only an incomplete one. Saving without investing is not a mistake of irresponsibility. It is a mistake of incompleteness Think about retirement savers over a 30-year period, both contributing $500 per month with complete consistency. The first keeps their contributions in a savings account earning 1% annually, responsible, safe, and ultimately insufficient. At 30 years, their nominal balance is approximately $209,000. In real terms, adjusted for 30 years of 3% inflation, this represents approximately $85,000 of purchasing power. The second person contributes the same $500 monthly to a broadly diversified equity index fund, earning 8% annually. At 30 years, their portfolio is worth approximately $675,000 in nominal terms, and significantly more than the savings account in real terms, after inflation adjustment. Same discipline, same monthly amount, same 30 years. The investment produced more than 3 times the retirement wealth. The difference between a 1% savings rate of return and an 8% investment rate of return, compounded over 30 years on a $500 monthly contribution, is not a marginal improvement. It is the difference between a retirement balance that is barely adequate and one that supports genuine financial security. The compounding differential between savings and investment instruments over long periods is the primary mechanism through which people who save diligently still arrive at retirement underprepared. Action. This week, review every account that holds your retirement savings. Identify what return each one is producing, not the nominal balance growth, the actual annual return percentage. For any account earning below 3% that is not serving the emergency fund function, research the appropriate tax-advantaged investment vehicle for your country and make a plan to redirect contributions this month. The investment is where retirement wealth is built. The savings account is where it sits before being invested. Underestimating. How long retirement lasts? Decision 3. The longevity miscalculation. The third decision that produces retirement poverty is one driven by a miscalculation that feels optimistic rather than reckless. And that is precisely what makes it so dangerous. Most people, when they think about retirement planning, are implicitly planning for a retirement of perhaps 15 to 20 years. They retire at 65 and plan for a financial runway that gets them to somewhere around 80. This planning assumption, which would have been reasonable for much of the 20th century, is increasingly inaccurate. And the gap between the retirement they plan for and the retirement they actually live is one of the primary sources of financial hardship in later life. Life expectancy has increased substantially and continues to increase. In most developed economies, a person reaching 65 today has a meaningful probability of living into their late 80s or 90s. A couple retiring together at 65 has a meaningful probability that at least one of them will live past 90. This means that a retirement that should be funded for 15 years may actually need to be funded for 25 or 30, nearly doubles the assumed duration. The financial consequence of this longevity miscalculation is not abstract. A retirement portfolio size for a 15-year retirement and then drawn down for 25 years runs out of money. At a point in life when the person is least able to return to work, least able to adapt to reduced circumstances, and most dependent on the financial security the portfolio was supposed to provide. The specific horror of running out of money in one's 80s or 90s in advanced age, with limited options for income generation, is one of the most preventable financial catastrophes that exists, and it is produced primarily by underestimating how long life will last. Consider the retirement planning of someone who at 60 calculates that they have sufficient assets to fund a comfortable retirement for 20 years, which would take them to age 80. They set their withdrawal rate accordingly, enjoying a comfortable standard of living in their 60s and 70s. At 78, their portfolio is beginning to run low. At 82, they are drawing on reserves that were not planned for. By 85, their financial position has deteriorated significantly, and at an age when returning to meaningful employment is not realistic, their options for addressing the shortfall are severely limited. The portfolio calculation was not wrong. The longevity assumption it was based on was in that assumption error made 25 years earlier, determined the quality of their life in their 9th decade. Actuarial data on life expectancy consistently shows that most people significantly underestimate their own longevity when making retirement planning decisions. This systematic underestimation, driven partly by thinking of average life expectancy rather than the probability distribution of outcomes, leads to systematic undersaving and overspending in retirement. The correct planning assumption for anyone in good health at retirement is not the average life expectancy, but a planning horizon that extends to at least 90, which for many people in developed economies is a genuine possibility rather than an exceptional outcome. The practical correction for this decision is to plan for a longer retirement than feels necessary. If the minimum planning horizon is 25 years, plan for 30. If you are in good health and have family history of longevity, plan for 35. The cost of planning for a retirement that turns out shorter than planned is a slightly larger estate for your beneficiaries. The cost of planning for a retirement that turns out longer than planned is outliving your money while you are still alive. These are not symmetric risks, and the planning should reflect that asymmetry by consistently erring on the side of longer horizons and more conservative withdrawal rates. Action. This week, recalculate your retirement planning horizon. Instead of retiring at 65 and planning to 80, plan to 90 at minimum. Then recalculate your required retirement capital using the 4% withdrawal rate. At 4% withdrawal, your capital needs to be 25 times your annual retirement expenses. At a more conservative 3% withdrawal, appropriate for a 30-year plus retirement, the required capital is 33 times annual expenses. See the revised target clearly. Then assess the gap between where you are heading and where this target requires you to be. Rating retirement accounts. Before retirement decision 4. The compounding interruption, the fourth decision that destroys retirement outcomes, is one that feels like a reasonable response to a real financial difficulty and produces consequences that are mathematically disproportionate to the immediate relief it provides. Withdrawing from retirement accounts before retirement. Drawing from the pension fund early. Cashing out the retirement savings to cover a present financial problem. This happens for understandable reasons: financial emergencies, unemployment, unexpected expenses without an emergency fund to absorb them, and it produces damage that is far greater than most people understand at the moment the withdrawal is made. The direct cost of an early retirement account withdrawal in many tax-advantaged structures is immediate and significant. In many jurisdictions, early withdrawals from pension or retirement accounts trigger both income tax on the withdrawn amount and an early withdrawal penalty, which together can reduce the net amount received to 60 or 70% of the balance withdrawn. The remaining 30 to 40% is consumed by the government in tax and penalties on money that was supposed to be preserved for retirement. But the true cost of the early withdrawal is not the tax and penalty, devastating as those are. The true cost is the compound growth that the withdrawn amount would have produced over the remaining years to retirement. A withdrawal of $20,000 from a retirement account at age 35, money that would have had 30 years to compound at historical market returns, may cost the account holder anywhere from $150,000 to $200,000 in foregone retirement wealth. The $20,000 withdrawn was a present solution to a present problem. It sacrificed a potential $150,000 to $200,000 of retirement security to solve it. Think about someone at 38 who faces a significant unexpected financial pressure, a job loss, a medical expense, a family emergency, and who has no emergency fund to absorb it. Their retirement account contains $40,000. They withdraw $20,000 to address the immediate crisis. After tax and penalties, they net approximately $13,000. The immediate problem is solved, but the $20,000 that was in their retirement account would, over the 27 years to their retirement at 65, have grown to approximately $170,000 at historical market returns. They solved a $20,000 problem by destroying $170,000 of retirement security. The immediate relief was real. The long-term cost was enormous. And crucially, the emergency fund that would have made this trade-off unnecessary cost only a fraction of what the retirement withdrawal ended up costing. Research on retirement account withdrawals consistently shows that early withdrawal behavior, taking money from retirement accounts before retirement age, is one of the most significant contributors to retirement underfunding. People who make early withdrawals from retirement accounts are significantly less prepared for retirement than those who do not, even when other variables are controlled for. The compounding interruption caused by a single significant early withdrawal and the foregone growth on that capital across the remaining years of the investment horizon can represent a substantial proportion of the retirement wealth gap experienced at retirement. The correction is prevention rather than recovery, because the compound growth foregone by an early withdrawal cannot be recovered after the fact. The prevention has two components. First, build and maintain a fully funded emergency fund and liquid savings so that unexpected expenses are absorbed by the emergency buffer rather than the retirement account. Second, Establish a personal commitment that the retirement account is not an emergency fund and is not accessible except in circumstances so extreme that the tax and penalty cost is genuinely the best available option. These pre-commitments, made in advance from a position of financial clarity, are the most effective protection against the emotional decision to access retirement savings during a financial crisis. Modsell action this week. Confirm whether your emergency fund is fully funded at 3 to 6 months of essential expenses. If it is not, build it as the priority before any increase in retirement contributions. A fully funded emergency fund is the most effective protection against retirement account raids, because it ensures that the emergency fund serves its purpose before the retirement account is ever considered. If your emergency fund is funded, write down explicitly, "My retirement account is not an emergency fund," and commit to this in writing as a personal financial rule. Carrying debt into retirement fee decision 5. The obligation that does not retire, the fifth decision that produces retirement hardship, is one that should be impossible and is increasingly common. Arriving at retirement still carrying significant consumer debt. The incompatibility of debt and retirement is mathematical, not just philosophical. Retirement means fixed or declining income, typically a significant reduction from working income. Consumer debt means fixed monthly obligations that do not decline with income. When a fixed, lower income meets unchanged debt obligations, the result is financial pressure that constrains every other element of retirement life, and that worsens as the debt persists and the retirement balance that might have covered it is drawn down to service it instead. The most common forms of debt carried into retirement are mortgage balances on the family home, increasingly common as people refinance to fund consumption during working years, and consumer debt from credit cards, personal loans, and car finance. Both types of debt create retirement-era obligations from working-era financial decisions. And while the mortgage on a family home is in many cases manageable in retirement through downsizing or equity release strategies, consumer debt in retirement has no such natural resolution. The proportional burden of debt in retirement is greater than the same debt carried during working years. A monthly debt obligation of $500 on a working income of $5,000 represents 10% of income. On a retirement income of $2,500, the same $500 obligation represents 20% of income. The same obligation, consuming a doubled proportion of a halved income, constrains retirement spending dramatically, reducing the quality of life. The retirement capital should be funding and potentially requiring the retirement portfolio to cover debt service rather than life expenses. Consider two people who retire at 65 with identical retirement savings, $300,000 each. The first person enters retirement debt-free. Their $300,000, withdrawn at 4% annually, provides $12,000 per year, which supplements their pension income and funds a comfortable retirement lifestyle. The second person enters retirement carrying $25,000 in consumer debt at 18% interest, requiring minimum payments of approximately $450 per month, nearly $5,400 per year. Their retirement portfolio must cover this debt service, in addition to living expenses, accelerating the depletion of their savings and leaving less capital to compound for later years. Same starting balance. The debt-carrying retiree runs out of money significantly faster, not because their portfolio was smaller, but because a portion of it was consumed from the first day of retirement by obligations that should have been eliminated before retirement began. Research on retirement. Financial Security consistently identifies debt-free status at retirement as one of the strongest predictors of retirement comfort and financial well-being. People who enter retirement without consumer debt obligations, regardless of their total retirement savings level, consistently report higher financial satisfaction and experience lower rates of financial hardship than those with similar savings levels but outstanding debt obligations. The absence of mandatory monthly debt service payments provides the flexibility that makes retirement income genuinely sufficient for its intended purpose. The correction for this decision requires treating debt-free retirement as a specific dated, non-negotiable financial goal, one that is pursued with as much deliberateness as the retirement savings target itself. Every working year before retirement is an opportunity to eliminate debt that would otherwise follow into retirement. The debt avalanche, prioritizing highest interest debt for elimination, applied consistently across the final 10 to 15 years of a working career, can produce a debt-free retirement position even for people who currently carry significant obligations. Action. This week, calculate your current debt elimination trajectory. At your current payment rates, on which debts will you still have balances at your intended retirement date? For any debt that will survive to retirement on its current payment schedule, calculate what additional monthly payment would eliminate it before retirement and identify where that additional payment capacity could come from in your budget. Retiring debt-free is a planning goal, and like all planning goals, it requires a specific timeline and a specific action to achieve it. Never calculating a retirement number. Decision 6. Planning without a target. The sixth decision that produces retirement underfunding is perhaps the most fixable and yet the most widespread. The majority of people approaching retirement have never calculated a specific retirement number. They do not know what they need. They have a vague sense of inadequacy, but they have never done the mathematics. This is the financial equivalent of driving a long journey with no destination entered in the navigation. You can drive for hours, work hard for decades, and arrive somewhere. But somewhere is wherever the road takes you rather than where you intended to go. And somewhere, for most people who have never calculated a retirement number, turns out to be significantly short of financial security. Calculating your retirement number is not complicated. It requires 3 inputs: your expected annual retirement expenses, your expected retirement income from guaranteed sources such as pension entitlements, and a reasonable withdrawal rate from your investment portfolio. Your retirement number is the investment portfolio size required to fund the gap between your guaranteed income and your expected annual expenses at a sustainable withdrawal rate. The most widely used sustainable withdrawal rate, derived from research on historical portfolio longevity, is 4%. At 4% withdrawal, your required portfolio is 25 times the annual amount you need it to provide. If your guaranteed pension income covers $30,000 per year and your expected annual retirement expenses are $50,000, the gap is $20,000, and the portfolio required to cover that gap at 4% withdrawal is $500,000. Most people who do this calculation for the first time are confronted with a gap between their current trajectory and the required portfolio size that is uncomfortable to see. That discomfort is the point. A known gap, however large, is the beginning of a solution. An unknown gap, the far more common situation, is a trajectory toward a problem that will only become visible when it is too late to meaningfully correct. The calculation does not create the gap. It reveals a gap that exists whether or not it is measured, and revealed gaps can be addressed. Invisible ones compound quietly into retirement crises. Think about 2 people approaching 50, both with retirement savings of $150,000. Both are planning to retire at 65. The first person has never calculated a retirement number. They have a vague sense that their savings should be larger, but no specific target to work toward. They continue saving at their current rate without urgency or deliberate direction. The second person runs the retirement number calculation for the first time and discovers their target, based on expected expenses and pension income, is $500,000. They have 15 years and a $350,000 gap. That gap, uncomfortable as it is to see, clarifies exactly what additional contribution is required to close it, and whether closing it is achievable with plan adjustments. They increase their contribution rate, optimize their investment allocation, and project forward to confirm the revised trajectory reaches the target. Same starting position. The one who calculated the number has a plan. The one who did not continues drifting. Research on retirement savings behavior consistently shows that people with specific retirement savings targets, a defined number they are working toward, accumulate significantly more wealth than those without specific targets. Even when controlling for income, age, starting wealth. The act of having a specific target changes saving behavior. It creates the urgency that a vague intention to save more never produces. And it provides a measurable metric against which progress can be tracked and course corrections can be identified before they are too late to implement action. This week, calculate your retirement number, estimate your annual retirement expenses honestly, housing, food, healthcare, travel, everything. Calculate your expected annual pension or guaranteed income. Determine the gap, the annual amount your investment portfolio must cover. Multiply that gap by 25 for a 4% withdrawal rate, or by 33 for a more conservative 3% rate. Write down the result. This is your target. Now compare it to your current retirement savings trajectory. The gap between them is your planning challenge, and it is now visible enough to address. Depending on a single retirement income source. Decision 7. The single point of failure. The seventh and final decision that produces retirement hardship is the one that amplifies every other vulnerability, depending entirely on a single source of retirement income that proves insufficient, unstable, or both. Retirement income security, like investment portfolio security, comes from diversification. A retirement funded by multiple independent income streams, each one contributing to the total, and none of them individually catastrophic if it underperforms, is dramatically more resilient than a retirement dependent on a single source. When any one stream is reduced, delayed, or proves smaller than expected, the others continue and compensate. Single-source retirement income has no such resilience. When the single source underperforms, the entire retirement plan is affected simultaneously. The most common single-source dependency is the state pension, the government-provided retirement income available in most countries. The state pension, in virtually every developed economy, is designed to provide a baseline, a floor of retirement income below which no retiree should fall. It is not designed and has never been adequate as the sole source of retirement income for anyone with retirement lifestyle expectations above the most basic. Yet millions of people approach retirement having made this single source assumption, assuming that the state pension, supplemented perhaps by modest savings, will be sufficient. For most, it is not. The second common single source dependency is a single workplace pension or defined contribution retirement account. While this is significantly better than state pension dependency alone, single defined contribution account carries its own concentration risks, investment performance risk, withdrawal rate risk, and the longevity risk of potentially outliving the account balance. A retirement funded by multiple streams, state pension, workplace pension, personal investment portfolio, potentially property income, or a small ongoing income from part-time activity is genuinely more resilient than one funded by any single source, however large. The third dimension of this decision, the one that creates the greatest regret for many retirees, is the failure to build any income-generating assets outside formal pension structures during working years. Dividend income from a personal investment portfolio, rental income from property, royalty or licensing income from created intellectual property, income from a small business or consulting activity, any ongoing income stream that does not require the depletion of a capital base provides something uniquely valuable in retirement. Income that can continue indefinitely without drawing down savings. People who have built even modest additional income streams alongside their pension during their working years consistently experience greater retirement security than those whose entire retirement income depends on drawing down a finite capital base. Consider two retirees with identical total net worth at retirement, $500,000 each. The first retiree's entire wealth is in a single defined contribution pension account. Their entire retirement income depends on withdrawing from this one account at a sustainable rate. When healthcare costs unexpectedly increase, or when they want to travel, or when they face an unexpected large expense, every dollar comes from the same single source, which depletes accordingly. The second retirer has the same total net worth distributed across a state pension, providing $8,000 annually, a workplace pension providing $12,000 annually, a personal investment portfolio generating $8,000 in dividends and sustainable withdrawals, and a small property that provides $6,000 in rental income after costs. Their total income is $34,000 annually from 4 independent streams. When one stream is disrupted, if the rental property has a vacancy, if the investment portfolio temporarily declines, the other 3 continue undisturbed, same total wealth. The diversified income structure provides genuine resilience that the single source cannot. Research on retirement income security consistently shows that diversified retirement income, income from multiple sources, is a significantly stronger predictor of retirement financial well-being than total retirement wealth alone. People with diversified retirement income streams report lower financial anxiety, are less affected by individual stream disruptions, and are significantly more likely to maintain their standard of living across the full duration of retirement than those with equivalent wealth concentrated in a single income source. The value of diversified retirement income is not simply additive, it is multiplicative in terms of the resilience. It provides against the unpredictable events of a 25 to 30-year retirement. The correction for single-source dependency begins during the working years, and the earlier it begins, the more options are available. Building a personal investment portfolio alongside pension contributions, even at modest levels, creates an additional income stream that becomes meaningful over time. Exploring whether property ownership is appropriate, given individual circumstances, adds another stream. Understanding the full entitlement from state pension and any workplace pensions, and planning around what those streams will actually provide, allows gaps to be identified and addressed while there is still time. The target is not any specific number of income streams. The target is a retirement income structure that is not catastrophically disrupted by the failure or underperformance of any single component. Mott's Talent Action this week. Map your expected retirement income sources. How much from state pension? Check your entitlement on the relevant government portal. How much from any workplace pensions? Request current valuations and projected income. How much from personal investments? Calculate the sustainable withdrawal from your current portfolio at 4%. Identify gaps and single source concentrations. Then identify one additional income stream, however modest, that you could begin building this year. The diversification of retirement income is a building project that takes years. The time to start building is now. Final message: 7 decisions. 7 specific, identifiable, entirely avoidable patterns that compound across a working lifetime into the retirement underfunding. That is the dominant financial experience of the majority of retirees in developed economies. Starting too late, losing the most valuable compound growth years while deferring for a more convenient moment that never arrives. Saving without investing, diligently accumulating capital into instruments that lose purchasing power to inflation over the decades they are held. Underestimating retirement length, planning for a retirement of 15 years and living through 30. Rating retirement accounts, solving present problems by destroying future security at a ratio of 1 to 8 or more in compound terms. Carrying debt into retirement, arriving at the finish line with obligations that were supposed to be settled before it. Never calculating a retirement number, navigating toward a destination without knowing what reaching it requires. And depending on a single income source, building a retirement that is catastrophically vulnerable to the failure of its single load-bearing pillar. Every one of these decisions has a correction. Not all of the corrections recover everything that the original decision cost. The compound growth foregone by a late start genuinely cannot be fully recovered by later intensity. But every correction improves the outcome from wherever the current position is. The person who addresses these decisions at 40 has more options than the person who addresses them at 50. The person who addresses them at 50 has more options than the person who addresses them at 60. But even the person who addresses them at 60, earnestly, urgently, with the remaining working years they have, can meaningfully change the retirement that follows. The retirement you will experience is being determined right now by the decisions you are making today. Not in the abstract sense that all future outcomes depend on present actions. In the very specific, very calculable sense that your retirement savings trajectory, your debt elimination timeline, your income diversification progress, and your understanding of your own retirement number are all active today, shaping the outcome you will live with for 25 to 30 years. Make the corrections. Start where you are. Use what you have, do it now, not because perfection is available, but because the compound effect of better decisions applied from today forward is always significantly larger than the compound effect of optimal decisions applied from some better future moment that may or may not arrive. If this video created urgency around your retirement planning, please share it. This is one of the most consequential financial topics that exists, and honest information about it reaches far too few people far too late. Subscribe to our Financial Edge for a new video every single week, and leave a comment below which of the 7 decisions resonated most with your current situation. Drop the number. I read every single reply. See you in the next one.